Good morning to everyone and welcome to our webinar devoted to the topic of Sustainable Development Goals, measuring and reporting the progress. Let me mention about the housekeeping rules at the beginning. And while I do so, please, we would appreciate very much if you enter into chat your name, position, and country, so we can test the chat functionality. As you can see, we plan our session for approximately 90 minutes. It will include also short interactions with you in form of polls and also via chat. And next to the main speakers from Agents for Impact, we are happy that we can have with us today also two representatives from two institutions that are exposed to microfinance sector, and they will share with us their field experience. We record the webinar, so you can come back or recommend to your colleagues to view it later. In case of any questions, feel free to use the chat or raise your hand in the dashboard. Please click on icon with hand and we will unmute you and let you speak. Slides will be shared with you after the webinar. So let us see who we have here. If you already managed to enter the chat. Yeah, we see people from Germany. Unfortunately, we don't see, we see greetings from everybody, but don't see other countries. But I hope you will be able to add your countries and your organizations so we can see, who comes from different countries of the world to see and hear about this important topic. My name is Pavel Kapstorfer, and I'm Network and Partnership Manager of MFC, and I will be co-moderating this webinar. Our main speakers today will be Manuela Fritsch and Andri Fritzun, both coming from German-based organization called Agents for Impact, which helps to connect the world of impact investors with the microfinance providers via identifying opportunities, evaluating risks, and impact measurement. They work very closely with investees, impact funds, based on which they are able to share with us practical examples related to SDGs, measuring and reporting. Manuela holds position of Director of ESG Risk and Impact and has more than 15 years of experience in international development and impact finance working for organizations like World Vision, Africa Fashion Foundation, and also held several positions at KfW Bank Group. Andri is founder and CEO of Agents for Impact and has 13 years of professional experience in the field of impact finance, among others, through the cooperation with KfW, Frankfurt School of Finance and Management in promoting SME finance and microfinance. I would also like to welcome two guest speakers, Andrea Abate, representative of Banca Etica. This is a cooperative bank operating in Italy and Spain, which is owned by the movement of citizen and social organizations, and they are provider of microfinance and ethical finance. Andrea is directly involved in research, data analysis, and social environmental assessment and reporting. And Ariane Schun from Vision, representative of Impact Investor, managing microfinance funds, but in addition to that, microfinance, they are also dealing with projects, among others, in education, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and the financing of small and medium-sized enterprises. Ariane is in her role responsible for integrating impact into investment process, as well as conducting impact measurement activities of the fund. They will help us to understand how do they deal with their SDGs, their measuring and reporting. This webinar is organized thanks to support of Social Inclusive Finance Technical Assistance, so-called SIFTA program, and therefore few words about the program. It is a continuation and enhancement of EU Program for Employment and Social Innovation, EASY, Technical Assistance. It is managed by EIP and financed by the European Union. It provides targeted capacity building, project advisory, and market development support to financial intermediaries active in the microfinance or social entrepreneurship spaces. Geographical eligibility is European Union countries, that's 27 European Union countries, and beneficiaries are microfinance providers such as banks and non-bank financial microfinance institutions, and also social enterprise finance providers. The project is implemented by consortium, namely by Frankfurt School of Finance, Microfinance Center, European Microfinance Network, and MF Rating. The applicants, microfinance and social enterprise finance providers, can apply for specific SIFTA services by sending EIB an email at the email mentioned on the screen, sifta@eib.org. And also a request for services template will be sent to the beneficiaries to formally apply to specific services. So this was shortly about the SIFTA program. And now I would like to give the floor to Manuela to start our today's webinar.
So hello, everybody. I'm sharing my screen. I hope you can hear me. And welcome to the webinar. Actually, we are heading towards Christmas, so it's a busy time, and everybody who made it, we are really happy to have another webinar on a very important but also challenging topic, which is like the SDGs. And I remember when I did my first course on the SDGs, that was back in 2014 already, with Jeffrey Sachs, who was really instrumental in developing the SDGs. And I still remember at that time that we could see, well, the SDGs, this is like 17 goals. This is really something that it's really challenging. And at the same time, they offer really big opportunities. And what we do see is also now that when they were adopted in 2015, and now we are halfway through, so maybe we've seen that they are not like the perfect master plan to save the world, but we also see that they can do much more than just be another reporting framework. And so in that tension, I'm really happy that we can have this webinar together and to really see how we can implement those sustainable development goals in our sector, and in particular to measuring and reporting the progress, which is so much needed when we look at all the different challenges that we are facing around the world. And I would really like to echo what Pavel has said before. This is like your webinar. So you are the webinar, you are the participants. So again, I would really like to encourage you, please do use the chat function, give us your feedback, your questions. From time to time during this webinar, we will be asking you questions, and I'd really like to encourage you to give your answers, to share us your feedback, because this webinar also represents a kind of introduction to the topic. There will be more webinars on the SDGs, and this webinar is also supposed to collect some of your feedback, views, and also experiences, and a little bit also of the views and the experience and, let's say, opinions about the SDGs, which will feed into more webinars to come. So when we look at the agenda today, I think major part will really be also on the SDGs, on the framework itself, how we can use it, but also on the role of new developments, which actually shape the way of how we use the SDGs and how the investment community also implements them, which is first and foremost some of the trends in sustainable finance and also in the regulation scheme, which really has huge impact. Also the involvement of principles, standards, and frameworks. And of course, we will also have a look at existing tools. And what would be a good webinar without having the practical examples of real life? And so I'm really looking forward as well. And I would also say thanks already to Banca Etica and to Invest in Visions, who are going to share their insights into how they implement the SDGs in their organizations, and also on some of the challenges and benefits they see and what they actually think they would need. Yes, so this is going to be a very important input to this webinar, which we will have in the second part of this. And at several stages, we always have some breaks where you can feel free to add questions, to share your discussion comments, and also to maybe ask a question. But of course, at the end of the session, we will have like a full space also where you can have a discussion and where you can also respond to what we cover in the different types of the sections. So the SDGs, a common global language and a common framework. So Andre, is it really, or what do you say?
Yeah, so thanks, Manuela. Exactly, we would love to make this more interactive with you and have a discussion because I think this topic is as we are closer and closer to 2030. We're now already in the middle of the period how we should reach our goals, SDG goals. And God sense we have deadlines here. You know, the society start moving, start thinking about SDG in terms of deadlines. And thanks again for being with us. And my question to you, how well do you know SDGs? And meanwhile, as you're answering this question, I would love also to mention why we are here and why we are talking about this topic. Because we have topic SDG or rating. It's our business pillar, and we are trying to make not only educate the society, but also to make money out of it. Because when the people are paying money, it's painful, and for them, then they take it seriously. And I'm happy that Manuela, who is director of SDG rating, and we have our clients on the ground in India, South East Europe, in Caucasus. All of them are never heard about SDG, even as of today or even a year before. And it's also it's all about it. We should educate our clients and promote sustainable development goals. That's why I hope you're answering the questions which we have here. And in meanwhile, I hope you already it give us also a good pool to understand where we are. If you're aware about sustainable development goals, yeah, it's not so social as I did this mistake in 2018 as we started working on SDG. Yeah, so the first results are here. 52% fairly well, but not to know about specific SDG targets, 52%. And 30%, which is also what in line what I'm telling you before, the 30% not well. So it's exactly what we are, the problem we are facing on the ground with our clients, with our microfinance providers, who didn't know about this, and especially regions which are somehow far away from Europe or United States. Yeah. And here I would love to go to the next slide, if you allow me, and to show you why sustainable development goals appeared actually now and what was before. And maybe you know before was Millennium Development Goals, and it was first try to change the picture for the whole world. And this Millennium Development Goals, unfortunately, we have this 8 main goals, but main idea was to take countries out of the poverty. And we have seen that actually it's failed and it was not so successful, and some mistakes was done. That's why, based on analysis of these mistakes, we have a next step, having this SDGs. And what is unique with SDGs, please check it with Google, but based on my knowledge, it's the first goals which are common, which are accepted by all governments of the world and by the public sector of the world. So it's unique because it's a common language for not only for nations, but also for private sector, because it's clear that if you would love to change the world, it's very limited to do it only with state government money. We should do it with the private money, because capital market is much bigger as government's bonds, yeah, or government's expenditure. That's why I think it's quite a good decision that you're with us in order to know more about this topic, which unites nations and private and government sector. If you go to the next slide, I would love also to tell you some more that it's not only 17 goals. 17 goals. It's a very interesting number in terms of also Bible. We can, I expose this number and you can find, but it's more interesting also in terms of indicators and targets. So, but even if you stay on the level of the goals and you see number 8, decent work and economic growth, but actually it's even much more as only these 4 words. It's more to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economical growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. That's why I'm really happy to have our partners, actually Investment Visions, Microfinance Fund. We are trying to, what our goal is Microfinance is actually to create economic growth and decent work around the globe. And it's one of the purpose of Microfinance. And if we go deeper, we see that we have targets and we have sub-targets. Just for your information, we have 1,500, more than 100 indicators within this 17 so easy represented goals. But I will not go to 1,500. It's more presented in our SDG rating tool for Microfinance, which we created together with ex-Moody specialists. But I will stay even on these 3 examples that we have 3 targets which are even more deeper going to explore SDG number 8. Yeah. Please, Manuela.
Yes, thanks. And this was actually just a little bit of an overview and a glimpse of what we actually do believe, that what a lot of people still don't know, that we see those icons and still they are much more elaborated than a lot of actors actually know. And we will have a little bit of a deeper look already a little bit later in this webinar. But one of the questions that we would also like to highlight in terms of the trends and the developments that we see is, why are standards and like a common language, why is this actually so much more important now, and what is actually happening also in the financial sector and also in the investment community and beyond? Because it seems that now we see the SDGs and the icons and the use of the SDGs almost everywhere. And so in the next section, we would like to discover some of the regulations and market trends that are also having an influence on how we see and how we use the SDGs. And I think one of the first ones is actually that whatever you see in terms of sustainable ESG, green product or sustainable financial products, impact investments, depending on the sources you look at, but this trend is something that is on the rise. And if it's about sustainability, if you call it impact, but we see that the use of labels is increasing. We also see from the Global Impact Investing Network that for the first time in 2021, what we consider like the global impact investing market has actually surpassed the threshold of $1 trillion for the first time. We're not saying that all of this is maybe like impact investing, how we would consider it, but we would really say that this is really something what we have seen over quite a couple of time. And especially last year, there was a G7 task force, which also dealt with the topic of impact investing. And one of the main components is also that we see that capital markets are also much more interested in information on impact, and not only in the developed countries, but also in the developing and the emerging markets. And we do think that it's also an opportunity to really demonstrate also the impact and to really say that this is also a way with the use of the SDGs to make impact more visible, and to really give that information to the capital market, because this is definitely some of the trends that we've seen over quite some time, which actually leads us to the second discussion. Now that everybody is using it, what is actually impact? And there is a huge debate now, because we see that in terms of sustainable finance, integrating E and S and G somewhere and somehow, this is actually now the norm. But what we are also seeing is that it is not only about doing less harm, like maybe reducing some of the emissions that we see in one of the sectors, or maybe excluding one really harmful social or environmental practice. But the whole debate has really shifted a little bit more to the question of how can we really achieve real life impact? How can we create impact and changes for the better in the lives of people? And I would assume that many of us who are in this webinar today have actually also chosen the roles that we are in at the moment because we do want to achieve real life impact. And with the increase in impact investments, where not only like the impact investors with a proven track record or like the development community have now also dealt with the investments, it's really important to see that definitions and common standards evolve, which also take into account that we need a common understanding of what impact investing is and what it's not. And here I'm giving two major, let's say, definitions, what's now considered as impact investing. The first one is of the Global Impact Investing Network, and it says that investments with the intention to generate a positive and a measurable social and environmental impact alongside the financial return, this is actually impact investing. And the impact management platform and also the ITF, which is like this impact task force from the G7, they even go a little bit further, and they also depict quite clearly that it's about a change in the condition of the natural environment, which is actually caused also by us as an investor or an organization. And having that in mind, it's really important to say, we have had the discussion already on what is impact investing, but now it's really getting a lot of more into the detail, and the whole debate also centers around the question to really distinguish between what is impact washing and what is also good definitions and standards that hold us accountable in order to really achieve that impact we also want to see in the real world. And this actually also influences the way how we also deal with impact measurement and the SDGs now. I think the second and let's say the third trend we've seen also is like the regulation, which has really shaken up a little bit the industry, especially in Europe, but not only there, because we see quite some new regulations. And here I would actually only manage one, which is the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. And so what is that about? So actually, since last year in 2020, investors must now categorize the financial products they have. Like if you are an investment manager or like a portfolio manager and you offer an investment fund, you are now, let's say, required to put this into a certain type of category. And so we have to look, what do you do with this fund? So there are several bit articles of this regulation. And so as provider of a fund or as somebody who has investment funds or has a financial product, you would have to say, for example, do I consider environmental or social characteristics? Do I promote that? Like if I deal with real estate, then if I consider energy efficiency in my products, this means that I would consider environmental and social characteristics. This is called an Article 8 fund. The next one would be if I do actually pursue a certain sustainable investment as my objective. And this is what typically the impact investors do, because we say we do want to achieve a sustainable objective with our funding and with our investment decisions. I'm sorry, could you maybe mute yourselves, please? Thank you. And those type of financial products, they are called the so-called Article 9 funds. And this is actually where a lot of discussion is about, because most of the impact investors and their products now fall under this Article 9 discussion. And one of the, let's say, effects of that is that for those financial market participants and for those funds and investors, the requirements in terms of what they have to disclose are actually the highest, and they are the most detailed and the most comprehensive ones. So that's something that's really important to consider, because it actually changes also a little bit the way of how investors, especially the ones with an impact orientation, how they manage their funds and how they also have to report on that. And just to give you an overview what this regulation is about, because it really covers most of the financial market participants, like asset and portfolio managers, financial advisors. There are a few exceptions, but pretty much most of the participants are covered. And this regulation for the first time really introduced very, very specific and detailed disclosures, and provides also specific templates and definitions which should be implemented and which should also be adhered to at the level of an entity, like for example, a certain asset manager, and also at the product level, like if you have a microfinance fund. Yeah, and in that context, using a common language and using commonly accepted methodologies like the SDGs is also getting really important, because as part of those disclosures, you would really have to state very in a detailed way, what is your investment strategy and what is exactly that sustainable investment objective that you pursue, and which methodologies and indicators. So how can you really say that you achieve that? So you have not only to measure and to do impact measurement, you also have to disclose now to a public audience a lot of details about what you do and the language you use, and also the methodologies you use. This is really something that has to be outlined and reported in a very, very specific way. And it's not only to be reported and disclosed maybe in very, very specific documents that only experts are reading and only like the financial community and the people who are competent in those details are seeing. No, it's actually also supposed to be published on your website and also in the progress reports. So this is really getting a lot of more attention, and it's also important to say that it really creates also a lot of more work for the investors, which are now confronted with much more detailed requirements in terms of how to report on the impact that they're actually trying to achieve. And to give you a kind of just an impression, what do we really mean by promoting a sustainable investment as an objective? I think it really applies well to our sector also, because it definitely says in the regulation as well that if you contribute to an environmental or social objective, what financial inclusion, what microfinance, what really tackling inequalities, or also promoting decent work, promoting the development of micro and small enterprises, what that is, this is really covered in the definition actually of this disclosure regulation. So it means that what we do as a financial, let's say, inclusion work, and also in the products and the work we do, this is really considered as a kind of sustainable investment objective, and it falls under that perspective. And it's also very important to see that it's not only promoting like a certain objective which is considered sustainable, it's also touching on the point that we should not really forget about the negative effects that we could have at the same time, and also that good governance is still really, really important, even if you do, let's say, contribute to a certain objective. And I think that's important to note, because we also see that in the SDGs, it's not only about measuring the positive effects, it's only about clearly watching out and about considering and taking more into account the negative effects. So that's in a nutshell what this Article 9 says. And I think it's really important to see that it really raises the bar now, not more for transparency, but also in terms of accountability of all our impact measurement and management approaches.
Thank you. I think it's also important to again and again to ask the question, not to like to be sleepy, especially in Europe in the winter time. And how do you think? We don't have this as a poll, but SFDR Article 9. How many funds? With our company based in Germany, and we advisor for microfinance funds and also rating company, but in domiciled in Germany. But how do you think? That's why. How much of such funds which are Article 9 conform? Because based on I don't have experience in other European countries, but for example in German-speaking countries like Switzerland, Austria, and Germany, also the question, how do you think where it will be more sustainable funds, Article 9, or sustainable funds in Switzerland or in Germany? And in order to give you more thoughts on this, and before you answer the question, how many in Germany, in Switzerland, it's 52% 52%, according to the Forum of Sustainable Investments report. It's 52%. Can you imagine all capital markets, and more than 52% is sustainable funds? It's exactly what I'm talking in before, that if you would love to change the world, we should do it together. I mean, private and public sector. Yeah, but let's check how it's in Germany, our regulated and bureaucratic Germany. How is Article 9? Please, Manuel.
Actually, it's only like 7%. Yeah, and so you can still see among most of the funds, it's really very, very rarely that people actually do adhere already to this Article 9, because it's really important to see we are still a market that needs to develop. Yeah, and impact investing, this is also one of the real challenges, but also one of the benefits of the SDGs. If we are able to be accountable and to be transparent and use common language, this can also build trust in the market and really increase also the impact investments that really adhere to common standards, and that can also show good practices and very also acceptable and generally accepted best practices in impact management. Yes. And I think this also leads us to some of the other questions that really come a little bit more to how we actually measure the SDGs and also impact in general, because what we have seen and what is also now taking a little bit more seriously in a sector that has not always been like the development community or like an impact investor with proven methodologies and processes to really measure impact. It's something that we call the theory of change. And this is actually about how do we really achieve impact and how do we understand impact. And that's actually another trend that we are seeing now. We come a little bit closer to the idea that not every result and not every headline in an impact report is actually a true impact. And what is actually a theory of change, or we also call it an impact pathway or a pathway of change? It is actually like the big picture and the model of how we do achieve impact. And the problem and the challenge with it is that usually when we talk about impact, this is not about a result, like I'm saying, I will build a wind park and very, very quickly I can tell that I have reduced emissions by this or that amount. Sometimes it's not that simple, because what we mean by impact and what we mean by the sustainable development goals and the impact we see, it's about long term, and it's also about lasting changes, which we have to consider in a little bit of a longer period of time. And they are complex. They are not only influenced by us, and we cannot only really say that we contribute or that we can attribute some of the impacts really truly to ourselves, but it's really important to see also how that looks and which type of indicators and which type of results we really say lead to that impact. And let me maybe think and show this to you in one of the, let's say, SDGs that are actually some of my favorites. It's actually SDG 1, and I also do believe that SDG 1, no poverty, is one of the, and actually the first SDG, because again, it really says end poverty in all its forms everywhere, and that's actually the ultimate goal. So this is the impact that we want to achieve. And many times in the financial sector, and what we also see in impact management, and what's changing actually is that we really look a lot to the input and to the activities, to the what we do and what we want to do, and not really to the impacts that happen a little bit on the right side of the outcome level, where actually the clients are concerned and where we actually do see that really we see impact in the change and in the real life of the people. Yeah, and going from the left to the right, this is actually what a theory of change is all about. It really looks about the what we do, about the funding side, about the inputs that we really invest, about the assistance that we give, also about the non-financial assistance and the non-financial components that we add. But this is still about the what we do. Yeah, and then we go to the output. So what actually happens as a result of those activities? And we really have to ask those questions, because this is what the SDGs also teach us and what they provide us, because there are specific targets which lead to the outcomes in the short term and the long term, and which actually represent the impact. And so if we look at the output, we can ask really meaningful questions also. If we do increase the access to finance, really for underserved and vulnerable populations. So in the output section, we do really see if we are actually on track to achieve impact later in the lives of the people. And we also see that in some of the targets of SDG 1, we see that we really have to ask also the question, do we help the clients to meet specific basic needs and also to increase their expenditures for basic needs, or do we actually improve the resilience of the clients? So this is something which is still considered and which is still part of some of the outputs that are a direct result of what we do. But when we come a step further and look at the outcome level, this is actually a level which we are more and more interested in, because we really want to see what the change and effects in the lives of the people are. And here we really have to see that we find more and more indicators and really like describing what is the actual impact that happens at the client level. And this can have different types of, let's say, indicators where we really have to see where is our target group and what can we really say, and how can we develop good indicators and good questions to see how this change really looks like. For example, if people have increased their impact over time, if they have gotten above the poverty threshold, if they can spend more on their needs, if they can spend more on basic needs, and also if they feel more confident in their daily financial decisions, or if they have more savings. So it's really about that outcome level that we are now increasingly speaking about. And I know that the SIFTA program is certainly targeting more of the European institutions. And I think, and that's why I also put a screenshot of the latest European and the latest sustainable development of Europe. Even in Europe, we can find meaningful indicators related to no poverty, because even here we have people at risk of poverty. And although the poverty thresholds might look a little bit different in a country like Bulgaria compared to Burundi in Africa, but even here we can define and look at meaningful outcome indicators that the SDGs actually provide to us. And it's actually that shift from what we purely look at types of the input and output that we choose, the number of clients that we serve, the number of activities we do, to really come to the output and the real impact that we want to see, which also represents a major shift, which is challenging, but which is definitely important to also raise a little bit on the accountability that we've seen before, to really demonstrate how we are able and why, and if not, we are able to really create change in the life of the people we want to serve. So that's actually one of the first parts. And before going into a second poll, I would like to ask, do we have questions or comments in the chat? Because that's really important before going to the next section. Pavel, do we have questions?
Yes, I'm here. Actually, only one question, but maybe we can answer that while you were touching base on ESG. There has been a question from Talant Beck, if there are any trainings about ESG or certification on ESG. Yeah, it's just, this is in relation to be able to train the staff and build a capacity in their teams.
To be honest, there are so many. Is this related to the SIFTA program or in general? Because if you see, let's say, all the different programs that now exist in the sphere of sustainable finance, you will see that there are really a lot of programs, even, let's say, for free, open source. I mean, the topic of environmental, social, and government, this is really something where you can find a lot of materials, not only in the terms of like ESG risk management, but also in the different methodologies you have. So I would really encourage you to watch out for the different types of trainings on the platforms, on let's say, notable and established providers, I think there are really a lot. And it's also important to see that ESG and SDG are having a lot of aspects in common. Yeah, it's the way how you use and implement them. So definitely there's a lot. Yeah, so.
And just from my side, I would love to add, what is the difference between ESG and SDG? There is no strict definition for ESG. So it's each house, each asset manager has its own understanding what is environment, social, and governance. Each data provider, MSCI, ESG, ISS, or Sustainalytics, they have their own understanding what kind of indicators they should measure in order to reach environment, social, governance. But what is unique with SDG, that it's a common language for the whole world, and it's defined what kind of indicators, like what is the poverty line, it's in numbers is given. So it's much more simplified, much more accurate. That's why if you wish to learn more about ESG, it's one topic, but if you think you need SDG, I did my SDG course at Yale School of Management, and I'm really happy that such big institutions as Yale is focusing on sustainable development goals. Thank you.
As well, yeah. And now that we've actually seen what the SDGs can really provide to us also in terms of more of the, let's say, more detailed impact measurement, the question would be to you again. So do you actually use already the SDGs, and why? And there are definitely different types of, let's say, aspects and criteria how you can use them. The first one is, do you already use them for your strategy? Like, for instance, do you align your social goals already with the SDGs? This is really one of the important questions, because how would you really measure them if you do not really align your goals? Yeah. The second is, do you use them for marketing and communication already because they provided common language, or also maybe only because you see that it's going to be like a really major funding or reporting requirement? So please go into the poll, and we would appreciate to see your responses quite maybe in a few seconds. Still wait some seconds, because I see that maybe half of the participants have participated. And
meanwhile, just one comment. I'm happy to see that we have 37 participants. Still, after 45 minutes of the starting webinars, you stayed with us. That means that the topic is getting interesting for you. Thanks for to be active and stay with us. Thanks.
Yes, and let's wait 10 more seconds, because I see that the number of responses is still rising, and then I will just show and close the poll. Okay, I would say I closed the poll. Let's look at the results. We see that quite some interesting that organizations already use the SDGs, and not surprisingly, we see that half of the organizations use it definitely for marketing and communication. And that's really interesting to see, because that also corresponds a little bit to the perceptions that we have. We see more and more of the SDGs compared to some years ago. And what's really important is also quite some organizations, like 37%, already align your goals to the SDG. So that's actually really important to see. Yes, so it's already 37%, and only 60% mention that it's basically about the requirements that you have from funders, from lenders, and from investors that you want and have to use the SDGs. So thanks again for your participation. And I think that's really important to note, and we will also take that up in the next slides. Because next slide. Yes, thank you. Because the question on the SDGs is also closely linked now that we have a common language, at least on sustainable development. And Andre was mentioning this. If environmental, social, and governance aspects are so many and so different, and how can we really use the benefits of a common language if there are no standards, frameworks, and tools and good practices that we actually share? And the good news is that now there are actually quite some new standards and also principles that are evolving and that are also representing some best practice expectations and also the shared views of what is considered a best and a good practice in that respect. And although there are quite a few, and I would like to say, once we share this presentation with you, we will also find much more in the reference section, which you can refer to. I'm only trying to handle and to touch on a few of them, but you will find much more in the references once we share the presentation with you. But what's really important in terms of the overall guiding principles that we see is that, for example, the operating principles for impact management, they are really becoming a standard now in the industry that define some of the major principles that should govern us in terms of professional impact measurement and management. They are called the impact principles or the OPIMs, and they used to be administered at the level of the IFC. Now the Secretariat has moved to the Global Impact Investing Network. And what's quite notable about those operating principles is, for example, that all of them, they consider impact measurement not only like standalone activity, but to really embed this also in a kind of a strategy and a kind of really strategic and a management approach on how to manage your real impacts, and also impacts in the sense that we have just seen before. And it's really about aligning an investment strategy with the goals you have. And in that sense, already like the first principle of the impact principle says, to really align those strategy with objectives and also account for the measurable effects that you have. And the operating principles, they do also refer to the SDGs and to other goals, but it's really important to see that just like the SDGs see a holistic and an overall framework, also impact measurement and management is about really setting, let's say, a common framework for really managing it and not only measure it as a kind of, let's say, standalone process. And one of the second, let's say, points that I find really relevant is that we often talk about the positive impacts that we do achieve and that we want to achieve. But one of the principles that I would like to highlight is also that we should more and more deal with the negative impacts that might come along or that might go while we also pursue our positive impact. And that's really important to mention and to manage as well, because this is also getting more and more important, and not only really see like the positive in it. And what the operating principles, which set a real like standard for many asset managers now, also ensures that there is regular disclosure and also reporting and transparency about what you do achieve and what you don't achieve, and maybe what the negative aspects are, and also on the processes that you use. And this type of impact reporting and also your processes are to be verified externally, which really sets a good practice and a best practice example for the market. And this is like one of the examples that we increasingly see now, and which really have evolved into one of a common standard that's used in the industry. The second, let's say, aspect and the second framework I would like to mention here is the impact management platform, which used to be called the Impact Management Project before, and which was like an initiative among proven and investors with a track record in impact management to how to really understand impact. And this is a common framework which has come up with 5 dimensions, and it's really worth looking into this, because the impact management platform provides a lot of tools and good principles and standards on how to start this process of impact management, also in relation to the SDGs. So you will find quite some helpful tools there. And I think it's really important to see that this is common, more and more standard, and really like overall commonly accepted practices in the market. Also in terms of guidelines, the big question now that we've also seen that the SDGs are used and also applied both in the, let's say, traditional development community and the public sector, but also among organizations from the non-profit, but also the private and the for-profit sector, the question is really, how can we truly say that we contribute to the SDGs? And here there's a couple of standards and guidelines, and I'm just trying to mention few that are also relevant to our business. And so we see them from quite some different angles. For example, from the OECD, which mainly takes like the development, let's say community, but not only that, but also maybe the asset managers, which is like the UNDP impact standards for sustainable development. And they also provide specific guidelines for how to manage and how to really, let's say, approach this topic and how to really introduce good practices and standards. For the enterprise and maybe the private world, it would be like the SDG impact standards, which are available for enterprises and also for bonds and for private equity. And this would be like a corresponding set of guidelines and standards for the private sector. For our sector, especially for the financial inclusions, I think it's really commendable to point out that, especially in terms of the SPTF and the European Microfinance platform, there has already been tremendous work also in the past to come to standardized and to come to outcome management guidelines, especially for financial inclusion and microfinance. And also from the PRI and from the, let's say, Principles for Responsible Banking and the UNEP FI initiative, there has been some guidance documents for banks which are signatories for the Principles of Responsible Investments or Principles of Responsible Banking that are also aligned to the SDGs, and that also provide very helpful guidance, especially in terms, and I put that one example here also for a report on financial inclusion and financial health and target setting. There are quite some others, but I think those are also, let's say, examples of guidelines and standards which set common market practices and which can be a really good starting point in really to dive a little bit deeper into the aspect of how can we really implement impact measurement with relation to the SDGs and come up with some common methodologies and standards. And coming from those high-level principles and actually, rather standards and frameworks, also to like the tools we can use to measure and to manage our impact and contributions regarding the SDGs, there are actually now a lot of tools, ratings, assessments and analysis, let's say an impact analysis and assessment tools and providers. I can only mention a few. And again, you can find quite some more in the references that we will be providing. And basically speaking, it's quite notable to see that there are now a lot of service providers, such as ESG rating, let's say providers, established, young, old, and also maybe very specialized providers, which have and which offer open source and also some commercial impact assessments. Some that are relevant for our sectors I would like to mention here, and maybe you would like to refer back to them. For example, UNEP FI offers impact analysis tools for different types of sectors, also for the real estate sector, but also like a new version of a tool which is for banks. And I think one of the instruments that we've seen also is like the Microfinance rating. That's also one of the partners under the SIFTA program, which also has an impact assessment tools, which is actually aligned to the SPTF and also to really, let's say, targeted also to our sector. It's also worth mentioning that Cerise has come up also with a dual is specifically, let's say, targeted to SDG output and outcome indicators. And it builds also on indicators which have been used for the private sector and especially targeted also to the needs of social enterprises. The next example is actually managed by the B Corp, let's say, certification agency, and it's called the SDG Action Manager. And this is also a questionnaire that can be used also in order to come up with metrics to collect information and to other questions. And there are also others. For example, we were mentioning we have also developed our own impact and ESG rating that I will just share in a minute to see how that practically works. But also there are a lot of other let's say, providers like Hedera has impact toolkits, which also offer digital and mobile tools. So you will see the array of tools, ratings, and providers are quite a few. And it's also very interesting to see there is not one solution that fits all. And depending on the type of institution you are, and depending on the analysis and on the goals and on the specific area you would like to work in, it's really that tools have pros and cons, and there are really a lot of tools which are provided also in an open source way that you can also adapt to your own needs. I wish I could say that there's like one single solution which we can recommend to you. It's actually not, but we see that there are more and more solutions in the market which can also be used and also be adapted to the specific needs. And to show one practical example with you, so how that can look like. So Agents for Impact has started to develop their own rating and our own rating already back since 2018, because the SDGs are really at the core of our company. And what we've tried to develop is to really have a similar approach like you know from the credit ratings. Yeah, this rating is not an ESG rating. It's also not comparable to a social rating or something which you might know in the type of like a pure credit rating, but it uses the same type of language, so that we have a questionnaire of approximately 120 questions, which are then also transformed into like 60 indicators. And each of those questions and indicators is actually, let's say, assigned to the targets of the SDGs. We measure different SDGs, but of course for our sector like microfinance and micro and small enterprise finance, we see that not all the SDGs are relevant in the same way. But what we do is that we analyze our institutions according to how they are aligned to the SDGs and how they are truly contributing, and also how their sustainability performance is. And in order to really communicate this also to our, let's say, partners and the institutions we rate, not only in the part of our own investment process, but also for the partnerships we have with partners that actually buy our rating, we really see that the type of how we do the rating and how we really interact with the clients to explain the questions we ask and to really explain the rating process. This is also something what we think contributes to the SDGs, because we need to create that understanding of what different types of questions and aspects truly mean. And so we produce an overall score, which can be seen also on the rating scale from A+ to D, depending on the percentage you actually achieve. And you can also see as like a rating organization how you perform in relation to separate SDGs, but also how you perform in general to environmental, social, and governance aspects. And we also use a breakdown to really communicate a little bit the results in terms of specific categories, like how do you treat staff aspects, or how do you deal with clients, how do you, let's say, address labor and human rights issues, or governance and environmental aspects. And so this is like what we produce from the rating, and it really enables like an insight into the organization and to identify what are aspects that are really good and what are aspects where we see room for improvement. And this is a very practical way how we really include and implement like the SDGs in order to make sure once an organization is aligned and shows a higher score, we do see that, of course, that organization is more likely to have an potential for really creating impact, which can then be measured, let's say, at the outcome level. And for us, it's also important to not only include quantitative metrics, but also to really see that sustainability is also about qualitative aspects and about a truly engaging process and about communication and also about the contextualizing of the SDGs. And this is why we also produce a report and also management workshops to not only produce a score and a rating, but really see this as a process that makes our partners better, that shows them how the SDGs work and also how it can really lead them on their impact journey. Yeah. So,
just to add, Manuela, I have seen the question in the chat that
yes.
one of them, if SDG, it looks like only for the government and not for the private sector. And exactly, FSR, our SDG rating is part of the investment process and part of the investment package which we submit to our client, where we advise Invest in Vision Microfinance Fund. And it's again, let's say, proof it's not about the government, it's more about investments and about the private sector, because we are financing not the government, we are financing institution on site. That's why SDG and SDG rating is all about, at least in our processes, about how to invest meaningful with impact and according to align to sustainable development goals. Thank you.
And Manuela, if I may also add
Yes.
one more question related
Yes,
to this rating tool, can you maybe go back?
Yes.
Yeah, that many microfinance providers, they are also interested whether these tools are helping them to implement any way of measuring and reporting within their management information system. So if you could say something about this.
Yes, I can. But if you don't mind, let me first go back to the other question, because
Okay.
I think that's important. And then I will also integrate this with the answer to that latter one. I think it's what has been one of the really, let's say, the experience and the lessons learned from the MDGs and from previous development goals is that we need the money of the private sector, and we need to channel funds into what we can really truly say what's supposed to promote sustainable development. And that's why the SDGs are also now increasingly, let's say, targeted, and tools and guidelines and practices and indicators are and have been developed to also include the private sector. So that's really like the difference to many development goals before. And many of those guidelines that we've mentioned actually help to implement the SDGs in the private sector, because those funds and also this capital is needed in a lot of variety, and also for a lot of different types of, let's say, SDGs and development and sustainable development areas and themes and goals to really use that money. And so in that respect, the SDGs are not easily, but they are definitely supposed to be implemented by the, let's say, private sector as a whole. And having said that, coming to the second question, yes, actually, AFISA and the rating tool is really intended to really provide that basis and to be like an assessment of the current status of, let's say, sustainability alignment and how SDGs are integrated. But it's really, again, like a process. We use the rating actually to identify the area within the organizations to see to which, let's say, SDGs are you actually already aligned, and how do your social and your environmental goals, how does that actually already show in your institution, in the practices you have, in your portfolio, also in a positive and a negative way. And actually we use the rating, we use the management workshop, and we use the results we see to actually guide and also to recommend further steps to really integrate more of the SDGs in that organization. And it definitely also affects on how we measure the impact, because we think it's a consequent step to say, if as an organization, you are not even aware of the SDGs, how do you expect to have outcomes and outcomes measurement and measurements according to the SDGs? We need to start with the alignment. We need to see, we need to analyze what you already do and where there are areas where you can actually also try to link your social and your goals that you already have in the way that the SDG framework actually intends also to see the targets and to also see the indicators. And how we do this is to provide also different types of breakdowns, because sometimes it also helps to really consider a little bit like how we can say like staff aspects or client aspects, but they are based on the same questions. Yeah, and so we can deliver this. Yeah. Good. Do we have any other, let's say, immediate questions to that part? Otherwise, I will go to the next and the last slide. Are there any other in the chat? Pablo, do you see one?
I just for the information, some people were asking more info, where they can find more info about AFISA, so I just published the link. so they can follow to your website, and there is a contact email, if anybody wants to discuss about this rating tool.
Yes, and you will also find more references in the presentation. So again, that important note that we will also be sharing more, let's say, references for what we cannot cover, let's say, specifically here.
I think at this moment we can go on, and then if there is anything pending, we can still return towards the end.
Thank you. And so now the question is, we've come from the principles, we come from common frameworks, which will help us to really implement the SDGs also as part of like a holistic management and like an impact management framework. The interesting question is, and that's actually also one of the questions that we are often asked, what about the indicators? What about the clear set of metrics that we are supposed to use? And the answer is, there is not a simple set where we can really say, this is all the indicators you need for the SDGs, not in the sense that they truly fit to each and every organization that wants to really relate or that wants to start to use the SDGs. But what we see is that there are now quite some common metrics and systems which provide meaningful, actionable, and also, let's say, simple and proven indicators which we can refer to. And again, there's only a selection on this slide, but we try to also develop them a little bit in a way that they are relevant for the microfinance and also for social economy finance providers. And first and foremost, I think one of the most commonly used system, which is really a common, let's say, framework, it's the IRIS Plus system, which is also administered and developed by the GIN. It provides a catalog of metrics where you can really assign your goals, your impact themes, and your categories also to specific indicators, which are really linked and which are also aligned to the SDGs and also to other reporting frameworks. This is really helpful. And for example, the IRIS Plus catalog of metrics also has specific indicators for financial inclusions. This is something where you can already have like a starting point to really find commonly accepted metrics, which are there actually. I think the second aspect we should mention that there has been tremendous work which has been done in the sector already, and also on the part of SBTF and also the European Microfinance Platform and others. And there are already some harmonization efforts ongoing on how to really find common metrics that are also applicable to our sector alone. And I would also like to mention that in last year, also the 60 decibels microfinance index has also come with metrics that can also be linked to the, let's say, SDGs, and which really measure also at client level what are the outcomes for specific areas and themes, especially in the dimensions of like household and business impacts, financial management, resilience, which are like core themes also for our sector and where you can also refer to. And although our webinar today is really a little bit more focused on microfinance because this is our sector, but I found a very interesting, let's say, work which has recently been published by the United Nations Research Institute for Sustainable Development. And this is particularly designed as an alternative to the normal ESG reporting, and it targets specifically enterprises from the social and the solidarity economy, like also social enterprises. And I think that's interesting. So if among us there are also organizations here, I think it's definitely worth checking out those new 61 indicators, which really provide a good set of KPIs to start with, and all of them are explained very specifically with a definition, with a clear description, and also how the link and the relevance to the SDGs are. So this is a kind of set where you can really turn to for specific KPIs in terms of relation also to the SDGs. But again, it's not that like a harmonized set which fits everybody already exists, but you can see this as a good starting point, and we will also mention some more of them in the reference section of the presentation. Yeah. And before going to the practical experiences yet, that we are really looking forward to also see how specific organizations treat the SDGs in their work. Let's have a look again for the ones that really do implement the SDGs already. It would be interesting to see which ones you actually really refer to, because we see there are some favorite SDGs and there are some SDGs which are targeted quite many times, and there are others which might be a little bit not representative. So please do choose, and please choose your top 3 SDGs that you actually work with. It would be really interesting to see how they look like in our sector. So maybe I give 30 seconds or a minute, and please choose and let us know what are your top SDGs.
And please scroll down also to 11 to 17 goals, because yeah, I mean, the technicality of Zoom does not allow to put all together, so we created 2 sub questions to list them all.
Okay, and I will still wait a second so that a lot of people can participate, and then I will share the results.
And you know, it's again and again how it's interesting to see that 38 participants with us after 1 hour of having this discussion on SDG. That's why it's again a point that deadline is we're approaching deadline of 2030, and a lot of should be done, and definitely we should be in the hurry. Yeah, so thanks for being so active.
Yes, and I would show them all now. So, and what we can see, actually interesting, SDG number 1, no poverty, is really one of the SDGs that's very, very often addressed already. We also see SDG number 8, not surprisingly, decent work and economic growth. Clean energy, also very high in your, let's say, participation. And of course, gender equality, but also quality education. Yes, so climate action, definitely high on the agenda now with 75%. So I think that's the top one, actually. Yes. So do you see that? So it's definitely with no poverty, which is very interestingly. To be honest, I would not have expected that, but this is exactly why we do the polls, because your input is really important. And we also see number 16, peace, justice, strong institutions, and partnership, because we definitely know we will not achieve the SDGs alone. Thanks a lot for your participation, and yeah, also for giving those really interesting insights into which SDGs are already used. So thanks a lot. And then I would really like to hand over, because I think this is really one of the most interesting parts also now. So thanks a lot also for Banca Etica and for Invest in Visions. And we would be really interested also to know how your experiences are with the SDGs, especially in terms of the challenges you face, and also how you implement that and what works well, and how you do see the SDGs. So thanks already for your input, and again, the floor is yours, so we are looking forward to your presentations then. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuela and Andri, for your part. And Andrea, please, the floor is yours. You can start to share your presentation.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for having invited Banca Etica to this wonderful webinar. And thank you for the previous presentation, really interesting. So I introduce myself really shortly. I am Andrea Abate. I work in Banca Etica in the Impact Models and the Social Environmental Assessment Office. So I start with a little background of who we are and about ethical finance principles in practice. And then I say something about how we measure SDGs, how we use them, and how we communicate them. And we will finish about benefits and challenges of using SDGs from a bank perspective. So who we are? Banca Etica is an ethical bank, was founded in 1999 in Italy, and we operate in Italy and Spain. We are a bank owned by a movement of citizens and social organizations. We have around 50,000 members, and we are inspired by the principles of ethical finance. So transparency, for example, we publish all our business loans on our website. participation, sovereignty, efficiency, awareness of the non-economic consequences of economic actions, as we will see later. And we believe that credit is a human right. So what is really specific of Banca Etica is our credit policy. As you see, all credit requests are investigated from a double perspective, because we do the normal economic and financial assessment, but we also do a social and environmental assessment. And in our credit policy, we have exclusion criteria. For example, we don't finance weapons, we don't finance activities that have a negative impact on the environment. And for example, we don't finance gambling, but we have also privileged sectors. So sectors that we want to mainly finance, for example, welfare systems, energy efficiency and renewable energies, and so on. You can you will have the slides, so I don't read them all. So how do we measure SDGs and impact? So the main uses are for measuring impact are internal control, because we want to assess the CSR profile of our clients. And we also want to identify the kind of business activities that we are going to finance, and we divided them into areas of impact. Then the second reason is accountability, because we want to be responsible and we want to communicate with our stakeholders how the banking activities are going on and how it works. Then a client protection, because we want to raise the awareness and reduce the vulnerability among our customers in order also to drive the quality of our portfolio. And then at last, the default prediction models, because we have developed models based on social environmental features. So what we measure? We measure on the first side the corporate social responsibility profile, which is divided in 7 areas: governance, work, supply chain, product quality, environment, networks and communities, and CSR and legality. Then we also try to measure the impact of the organization, which is the impact deriving from the normal activities of the organization that we finance, and the impact of the loans. So the impact deriving directly from the finance that we provide to our customers. We divide those impact measurements in 24 areas, and we use 40 specific indicators. That is the area that is directly linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we can see in this slide the various impact areas. We have 5 macro areas, which are social, community, environment, international, legality, and rights. And then we have other sub areas, which are, for example, for social, employment of disadvantaged persons, health, social housing, social services, and you can read the others. But what you can see is that we try to refer every area to a specific or more SDGs. How we do this? We try to link the impact, the specific impact, with the main targets of the SDGs. Then how we do it? Okay. How we do it? When clients come to us to ask for finance, they have to fill in for every loan a social environmental questionnaire on our website. And this questionnaire has many types of survey questions. For example, close-ended questions, rating scale questions, multiple choice, and so on. Overall, we have for big and medium enterprises 99 questions. So it's quite heavy for our clients, but it's really helpful for us. We have 95 questions for small and 76 for micro enterprises. From these questions, we try to elaborate those data, and we provide some indicators, which are 101 for big and medium enterprises, 94 for small, and 71 for micro enterprises. Then, after this data provided from our clients, we have the social evaluators, who are volunteers and members of the bank, or we can have also the credit officer. And what they do, they comment all the answers provided. They can comment them, and in the case if needed, they can enter missing information or change the data, but we don't override the previous information provided by our customers. How they do them? They go directly to the offices of the organizations in order also to have a direct communication with our customers. Why we do so? Because, of course, the main challenge is the data quality. So in order to have a higher data quality, we do all those checks, but also because from those data, we have built a rating ESG rating to evaluate the profile of the organizations, but we use also our ESG scoring inside our pricing models in order to engage more our clients. So what are the major challenges? The variety of parties involved, because there are different types, size, scope, and legal structures of organizations. So our questionnaire is structured in the case of for example, the size of the organization. We have a variety of credit lines because we have working capital and long-term funding. And we have, for example, specific projects or general credit line. So the approach could be different about the type of credit line. Then how we use and how we communicate those information. First of all, we use it to do the social environmental assessment, as I said previously. But we have also another tool, which is the impact appetite framework, which is a set of indicators to monitor all the social environmental impact activities that we do, and they are mainly linked to the SDGs. This is a tool for the board and for the management in order to set a minimum level of internal and external impact. We have 3 different thresholds: an appetite, which is the goal that we want to achieve. We have an early warning, which is a threshold signaling that the result could be worsened for each indicator, and we will need a corrective action. And we have a tolerance threshold, which is the minimum level below which there is a danger of failure to achieve our statutory goals or mission, and it could be also a risk of reputation. The criteria are adopted about selected thinking about the measurability, the relevance and clear meaning, and also parsimony, in order to have the same amount of indicators as for the risk appetite framework. Then here in this slide, you can see which indicators do we use. They are divided in 5 areas: environment, rights, governance, international peace and justice, and promotion of ethical finance. And we have totally 27 indicators. As you can see, we try to link most of the indicators with the SDGs. And there is, for example, loans for combating climate change, which is a outside indicator and is linked to SDG number 13 and 7. But we have also, for example, inside indicators, for example, the pay gap within the bank, which is directly linked to SDG number 8 and 10. So we also try to communicate at best with our impact report, because since 2019, we disclose all the impacts of the activities of the bank, and we use the SDGs to communicate immediately with a distinguishable framework our impacts in order to increase the effectiveness of our communication. As you can see, for assistenza sociale is social welfare, we have linked to SDG number 1, and we have also disclosed not only the main target, but also the sub-target that are mainly connected to the activities that we include inside these impact areas. But we also try to measure our direct impacts. For example, about SDG number 13, climate action, we can disclose, for example, the CO2 emissions avoided. All those information comes, I want to say again, comes from our customers. So it's really important to disclose every question that we ask to them. But we also can disclose, for example, the tons of waste reused and recycled and the renewable energy systems installed. So we didn't use the indicators that you can find inside the SDGs because from our perspective are not completely suitable to our bank and to mainly to the activities that we finance, but we try to link the main theme with the SDGs. For example, here I also put, for example, no poverty, and we can disclose, thanks to the SDGs, the people receiving assistance under international cooperation projects or people who benefited from social welfare services. So this is a common language, and so this is really helpful to make everybody understand what kind of impact we are disclosing. About microfinance, which is in Italy and Spain, so non-international microfinance, which is linked to, from our opinion, to SDG number 8, we can disclose the amount of direct loans, so social assistance and entrepreneurial microfinance, but also loans to MFI and equity investments in MFI. But what is really specific about the SDG that is the fact that we can disclose the percentage of clients which are women and that we provide to them microfinance, but also the percentage of citizens from global south countries. Those kind of informations comes directly from personal data, so we don't ask them with a questionnaire in this case. About international microfinance, for us, since our foundation is really important to support microfinance institutions all over the world, and about specific indicators, we could disclose the beneficiaries which are directly attributable to Banca Etica, which were in 2021 3 million people. But what's really interesting, and we did it asking directly to the microfinance institutions that we finance, we could disclose that 33% are rural beneficiaries and 63% are women. So, as I said before, the communication with other institutions is crucial in order to disclose at our best the information about our finance activities. So, sorry if I was really quick, but the time is almost up, and I want to say something about the benefits and challenges of using SDGs from our perspective. So a small bank providing finance mainly to SMEs, the main benefits is the possibility to disclose our impacts aligned with an international framework, which is recognized all over the world. Then a better assessment and evidence of our impacts, and at last, the tracking of our impacts through a wider lens. So we won't be so specific, but we can use a wider lens to disclose at our best the impacts that we do. The main challenges for us is of course, a better data quality of information received from our clients, because many of them maybe don't have available data. So we try to engage them to provide more data to us. Moving from a framework deriving from our membership base, which is really strong, to an international framework. And at last, to identify only one specific SDG for individual lending in order to disclose not crossing the monetary values of the finance linked to SDGs. So thank you very much. You can find our email. So if you need something, you can write an email to us. And thank you again for invitation.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I mean, great presentation, very concrete to show how you deal with SDGs. If there are any questions from the participants, from audience, please use your moment now. We can ask Andrea, or you can save it for the very end, but we still have Ariane with her presentation. So I would like to ask Manuela, do you want to guide us through together with Ariane with your questions, or shall we leave just the space to Ariane? I will leave this up to you.
Actually, we do not have questions in the chat. I would just like to give the floor to Ariane. And
Okay.
I think once we've seen the challenges also from Banca Etica, I think this will be something that would also be shared. Although we had the idea to really sharing two different perspectives on the SDG implementation. And so, Ariane, maybe please go ahead, because maybe some of the benefits and challenges might be similar, and then we can have a roundup of discussion. So thanks.
Yeah, clear. So if there's any questions, just tell me, since now I'm having a look at the presentation, so not so much in the chat. So yeah, just interrupt if there's anything. Yeah, so welcome also from my side. My name is Ariane Schön. I work for Investees. Investees is an asset manager. We are based in Germany, and I wanted to give you just a short introduction into Investees and in one of our main products, our microfinance fund, to then afterwards go more into deep on the SDGs and how we work with them. So Investees was founded in 2006 by Edda Schröder, and we have the aim to provide access to impact investment to institutional and private investors. And in 2011, we launched the first public microfinance fund for private and institutional investors in Germany. So today there are more microfinance funds also available for private investors, but in 2011 it was the first one. And as a company as a whole, we have more than 1 billion euros assets under management and 26 employees. And here you can see a photo of our team in our international team, which is based in Frankfurt. So just briefly, I wanted to explain a bit how the IIV Microfinance Fund works. So it's refinancing financial institutions in emerging markets, which means that we provide loans to financial institutions, microfinance institutions, non-banking financial institutions, or also banks that have a microfinance portfolio. And we provide loans in mainly Euro or USD, but also in local currency. And from the perspective of the number of borrowers that we reach, it's more than 600,000. So yeah, through our portfolio or through our loans, we provide indirectly loans to this number of borrowers. So yeah, where are we active? So this is from October, end of October, but so we have a more focus in Central and South America, as well as in Asia, different regions of Asia, and in the Caucasus. In Africa, we are a bit less represented. Yeah, we are invested, or we provide loans to 92 microfinance institutions in 33 different countries, so all outside of Europe, as you can see here. How does the microfinance fund work? So as I've said, here on the left side, investors, they can pay into the microfinance fund, invest in a certain share of or a certain number of shares of microfinance fund, and then the money goes round, let's say. That's why we have chosen this illustration. So it goes to the microfinance funds, which then provides loans to microfinance institutions in emerging markets. And they then provide loans to micro and small business owners in these countries. The money is then paid back to the microfinance institutions, which goes back into the microfinance fund. And yeah, our investors receive a small return, small and steady return on their investment. As Manuela, because Manuela has mentioned it, so regarding Article 8 and Article 9, so our fund is an Article 9 fund. with regard to the sustainable finance disclosure regulation, because we have set a sustainable goal as or we want to achieve a sustainable goal through our investments. So that's why we have chosen to be Article 9, which entails a lot of responsibilities also and requirements to keep being Article 9. So we have a lot of requirements that we need to disclose, information and data we need to disclose. But we think that Article 9 is the categorization which fits to us most. And that's how I come also to the SDGs. So for our fund, we have chosen 4 SDGs as being our main goals. So no poverty, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, and reduce inequalities, because these are the SDGs we think that we can make a realistic claim that we contribute to them. So for us, it's important also to have this realistic view on it, to not overclaim anything. Maybe some of our investments contribute also to other SDGs, but we would say that's not really enough. So we have chosen those 4 ones. And yes, through the Microfinance Fund, we want to promote good and fair employment. That has also been mentioned by Andri earlier. Local income, the creation of jobs, the promotion of equal rights, and the strengthening of the private sector. So how do we want to achieve it? So we have different aspects on how we want to work through that. So in our ESG policy and the investment policy, we have different norms and exclusion criteria set. So similar to Banca Etica, we also have exclusion criteria or sectors that we don't want to invest in. So this is all included in the different policies. And then we have different aspects of our ESG analysis, which is impact measurement. So which would be mainly after the investment has been done, so that we collect a certain set of indicators through which we can see how is our contribution to different SDGs. I will come back to that in a moment. Then we have an ESG performance scoring and with the risk analysis, which I will not explain so much in detail now, because we want to talk about the SDGs. So coming back to that, so how do we report on the SDGs, or which are the SDGs that we use? So we receive indicators from our microfinance institutions through our advisors. Agents for Impact is one of our advisors, and we also have other ones. So on a quarterly level, we receive a set of standard social performance indicators, which we then publish in our publications. So here's the screenshot we see here, sector shares and the social indicators. This is published in our fact sheet, which we publish on a monthly basis, where we want to present in which sectors our microfinance borrowers, microfinance borrowers which are benefiting from our loans, let's say, in which sectors they're active, and then also we have a certain set of social indicators. So, for example, through the number of micro entrepreneurs that I've mentioned earlier, so over 600,000, we would say that this contributes to SDG 8, since this provides decent working and economic growth for them, or working opportunities. Then we also analyze the share of women and men, then contributing to gender equality. So we try to track, or we track how much this share is for women, and try to increase our contribution to that. And then the average loan amount, for example, which is currently $1,000 or more or less 1,200. This gives us an idea on whether we reach, for example, low-income households, because we say if the loan amount is smaller, then it's more likely that we would reach lower income households. On a quarterly level, also we receive the type of lending, whether it's group or individual, and whether this is the loan has been provided in a rural context or an urban context. And then, so below the two ones, we are yet to pilot and to implement them. So on a yearly basis, we also want to collect more outcome indicators. So as Manuela has mentioned, there are different levels, let's say, of indicators or of impact measurement. And what we see is that the indicators on the top, they are really the basic or the standard indicators in microfinance also, but we would like to go further and also collect more indicators regarding outcomes, so which does not only show us how many people have we reached, but really what has been the influence on the ground, let's say, or what has anything changed. So for example, if the income has changed of female borrowers, or whether they have been able to use the loan for their economic activity, whether customers have been satisfied with the loan or the whole process around, and things like that. Or maybe for SDG 10, because I see it now here on the right side, we would like to track whether we have reached young people through our loans, or so these are all indicators we're currently working on, and piloting them also to see how we can present our impact also more comprehensively. And then on the basis, I put also the principal adverse impact indicators, which relate to the social sustainable finance disclosure regulation, SFDR. So to see, okay, that our impact or negative impact, unintended impact towards other SDGs is as low as possible. So we want to track environmental, social, and governance, and the coherence to international standards. So we want to see whether our impact is also, our negative unintended impact is as low as possible in this regard. Yeah, so that's how we work with the SDGs. So we use them to present our impact on the ground, but we see also that there's more to do to show a more comprehensive analysis. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Ariane, and also Andrea, for your really, really good presentations, and also to really sharing a little bit that you also, I think when we can see that both of you really appreciate with your organizations like the benefit of having an internationally recognized framework, and at the same time we see, and this is also relating to one of the questions that we have in the chat and that I would also like to ask, finding the right indicators which fit to your organization and which also fits to, let's say, the framework that you've had before. Yeah, and also in terms of the data quality, meaning defining indicators that you can also measure with the clients and in the fields that you have. So maybe we can have like one question to each of you, because there was a question, did you make a smart analysis for the SDGs? So I'm not sure if I understand correctly. Please correct me if I do bring it in one way. I think this is about if the indicators that you have, let's say, chosen, and also how you did it for the SDGs, are they smart? And also, how did you develop, let's say, which type of data and which type of indicators to choose? I think definitely all of us agree that the essence and the practical aspects of impact measurement is quite a challenging and also quite a complex task. So maybe, Andrea, maybe you would like to start, and that would be great to hear your insight.
Yeah, I hope that I understood well the question, but to build our indicators, what we did is to read a lot of international frameworks, and we also had many speeches with, for example, with NGOs, which are our clients, and there was a constant dialogue with our members, because they are very active usually on sustainability activities. So they have different backgrounds, and they can help us to build more specific indicators that can be useful to map the impact. So a mix of backgrounds and knowledges. About the link with the SDGs, I don't know if it was smart, but what we did is just to understand the meaning of the SDGs, so not the exact text, but the meaning in the background, and we try to link with the activities that we know that we put inside the different impact areas. So I hope it was smart because it's different to put an activity that can be very different, broad, and etc. inside a single SDGs. So that was the challenge.
Thanks a lot.
And to disclose better, what we can do is to explain what there is inside the areas. So not just to put the SDGs, but to disclosing, explaining what is inside the different areas. Thank you.
Definitely true. Yeah, I think becoming more transparent what we actually mean, what we say with either an SDG or an indicator or whatever we disclose is actually crucially important. So thanks a lot. And I do hope that we also answered your questions. If not, please make another comment in the chat. But Ariane, what would you say? Because the question of indicators, not too many, the right ones. So, and also the data which we receive, how do you see this?
Yeah, I think in our case, it was, let's say, a realistic approach to take, yeah, so to see which indicators can we get also, because, yeah, it's nice to have wishful thinking, yeah, of indicators we would love to have, but which cannot be collected on the ground, yeah. So we have the challenges, let's say, that we provide loans not in Europe or not in Germany. So we also have this distance, let's say, to the institutions. So we also need to see what is feasible for them. So it was a realistic approach to see, okay, what are the indicators that we receive? So because, as I said, these are the indicators that I mentioned. These is a standard set of indicators, let's say. Yeah. So in the microfinance sector, there's the fact sheet where there's a certain set of indicators, and so we took them and then had a look at the indicators from the SDGs or the so below, not the indicators, the targets. Sorry, and then we had a look where can it match to what. So and then to say, okay, where is our contribution to it? And where can we make a realistic claim also to that? So that's how we approached it, to say, okay, what are the indicators that we are already receiving, and how does it match to the SDGs? And now in the next step, since we want to collect these outcome indicators going further, then we have gone a bit the other way around. So having a look at the SDGs and then also exchanging with other actors in the field. So SBTF, you have mentioned them, Manuela, and others, to see, okay, what are the indicators that would be good to have or nice to have, and then to see what is the realistic approach. And what we are doing, we've been doing now, is to pilot these indicators, so to be in contact with the microfinance institutions and ask them, are these indicators that you might be able to receive from your clients? Yeah? So because what we don't want is to overburden them, but still at the same time, asking input from them also. Yeah. And we do that together with our advisors. So we also, it's also valuable to receive input from the advisors, what is feasible or not. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I think that was a really interesting conclusion also, and you mentioned something really interesting and important. I think all of what we've discussed today, and we've had two very good examples who've already have quite some, let's say, experience in implementing the SDGs, but actually a lot of those systems are still in redevelopment, and impact management is also something which is not like linear and which you once start and then you finish it. So it's really also a development. It's also in, let's say, revision at the moment because of the developments we've seen. But yeah, thanks again for sharing your input. And we've actually dedicated 20 minutes of time for questions, which we already included in the presentation. And so I see only one last remark, which is on if we could also adapt and also transfer our experience to the MENA region. So actually, the SIFTA program focuses a little bit on Europe. This is why we also did it in our presentation today. But maybe in the future, there will also be something which can be specifically dedicated to your region and where you find also meaningful examples and practical input there. So I still hope you found it helpful. And the good about a webinar is the outreach online is much farther than our European areas. And I think definitely that the participants also show this. Yes, so thanks a lot for your participation. Unless there are any other questions and remarks, I can only let you know that, yeah, it was a great pleasure to speak with you. I think we'll never be finished with one webinar on the SDGs, but thanks a lot for your time. And again, a really, really huge thanks again also for Banca Etica, Andre, and also Ariane for sharing your insights into some really practical aspects of it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Manuela.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Farol.
Yeah, thanks,
Andrea.
Manuela. Thanks a lot. I mean, on behalf of MFC, I would really like to thank you all, the speakers who contributed to this webinar. I think we heard some great information, great contributions, and good examples. And let me wish you all peaceful holidays. And we are looking forward to meet you sometimes next year on our future webinars. And I also cordially invite you to our next year annual conference, which will take place in Budva, Montenegro on 24th, 25th May. We will provide more detailed information in upcoming weeks. But it will be a very special event since MFC is going to celebrate their 25th anniversary. So we are all very much welcome, and we hope to celebrate it with you. So thank you once again, and peaceful holidays.